as an industry, we're probably the furthest behind using the data to better the human condition, right? Because you can blame it on regulation and stuff like that, but it's also because there's incentive models. You have to understand how healthcare works, who pays for it. There's so many different nuances into it. And our key focus today is about like the biggest way you can impact healthcare and like as an industry is if you change the economics of driving the business of care. And that's what we focused on at Autonomize, right? And I can unpack that a little bit more, but the idea that like you have to make sure that the right care is delivered to the right person at the right time.
Hi, my name is Dimitri Benici, and I'm a content creator, agency owner, and AI enthusiast. You're listening to the AI Agents Podcast, brought to you by Jotform, and featuring our very own CEO and founder, Ida Tank. This is the show where artificial intelligence meets innovation, productivity, and the tools shaping the future of work. Enjoy the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the AI Agents Podcast. In this episode, we have Ganesh Padmanabhan from Autonomize AI. He is the founder and CEO. How you doing, Ganesh?
I'm good, Dimitri. Thanks for having me. And it's great to be here.
Nice. How's that out there in Austin right now? Pretty good?
It is pretty warm, and I think it's going to be like 105 degree Fahrenheit today, which is perfect summer for us.
That's perfect. Okay. Not for me. Chicago's actually got, in my opinion, what is good weather right now. It's like 60, 70 degrees, which for us is kind of crazy. Usually it fluctuates between cold and colder. But weather aside, let's talk about AI. Appreciate you for making the time. Tell us a little bit about how you got your start in AI and how you got to the place to even, start up a company like Autonomize.
Thanks for having me again. Excited. I've watched a lot of your shows, so it's really exciting to be here and to talk to you about this and talk AI and AI agents. So how did I get into AI? I mean, through math, probably, right? I mean, most people did.
Fair enough.
It's I've been in the industry in and out of data, AI, machine learning, all of that stuff for 15 to 20 years. And the joke at the house is like my 11-year-old tells me, I'm like, dude, I've been in AI for all this while. And he goes, Dad, you must not have been very good because only the last 2 years it has taken off. And then the reality is, but that's the thing about AI today, right? Everybody's talking about AI and agents. It's like a huge moment that took 20 years, 30 years to get here. So I got into AI initially through data. So I was actually spending a lot of time. My initial part of my career was in corporate. I was at Intel and Dell for a long time. At Dell, I ran a pretty large business, and one of the, it was the converged infrastructure business was at that time the youngest billion-dollar business that we built. I was a GM for it, and one of the fastest growing part of that segment was big data at the time. And this was the days of Hadoop, clusters, SAP HANA, analytics, and all that stuff. And there was a definite trend and movement where like there was this a graph that everybody used to talk about where the amount of data produced in the last 2 years is double or far exceeds the amount of data that's produced ever in history. So it was very evident being in the midst of data that with all the amount of data that we have, we need better tooling to analyze and understand what the hell is there in the data. So that's how I really got into early, and it was through machine learning. It was like statistical analysis, statistical models, regression models, and so forth. I ended up, after I left Dell after 11 years, started a company in explainable AI. So my skill stack earlier on was like, how do you go and help large enterprises really demystify some of this technology and build something new, meaningful? And AI, one of the biggest blocking points at that time, which is A, it was still new, 2016, 17. B, for enterprises to adopt it, somebody has to explain it can't be a black box. So I built an explainable AI company a little ahead of the time, but one thing led to the other. There was a later stage company called Cognitive Scale, which was one of the original OGs of AI. It was founded by IBM Watson's original team. And I ended up joining them as a head of growth for the next few years. So got really deep into AI. We worked with several of the large Fortune 100 companies across multiple industries. Have a lot of battle scars on my back even today of trying to launch AI in production, and packaged all that up and did another startup after that, focused on data readiness for AI called Molecular. And then founded about, post-COVID, it was very evident that this, humans have far exceeded our capability to understand, comprehend, and make sense of all the data that's being, generated around us. So you need an augmentation layer of AI, of human cognitive functions, like being able to look at images and understand that, reading text and comprehending that, reasoning across multiple data sets. And then no other industry was more hurting because of the lack of that capability in a highly constrained industry like healthcare. And that was the origin story for launching Autonomize AI about 3.5 years ago.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. And, I guess just to speak back to your experience a little bit, you said you had some battle scars in there. Like what were some of those difficulties that you had early on?
So, look, the first generation of AI was about like, how do I predict not the next token, but the next number or a digit, right? It was classification, your classic machine learning models. The biggest
Okay.
problem that we still understand it because those models were a lot more rigid in terms of its ability to deal with the variance in the data itself, right? Because unlike the more language models, which are more understands the human nuance and stuff like that, you had to pre-process a lot of that structured or semi-structured data into the right data engineering output for these models to actually go and put things in production. So the popular use cases in the mid 2010s in with AI were things around digital marketing, segmentation analysis, your next best actions, all of that stuff wherein you're predicting an action or you're classifying information and so forth. All of those problems when you go and like when it runs great, we didn't have notebooks at that time, but on a
Hmm.
laptop, right? It runs great on a spreadsheet and you do a regression analysis. But when you get in the real world, that data was so much more varied. You had to do so much more pre-processing on that data to make the machine learning models absorb it the right way to give you the right output. So those were the class of problems then, wherein most organizations, and we work with like several big ones, including like JP Morgan Chase and Goldman Sachs and stuff, where it was great to go into a pilot and solve a problem, including some large healthcare organizations back in the day. The initial problem, initial pilot always looked great. And
Yeah.
then you go into production and the
Okay.
entire thing, it's like the Mike Tyson statement, right? Everybody has a plan until they get
Until you get
punched in the face.
punched in the face. Yeah.
Yeah. And the most of the calories that you have to spend to make sure that it worked, was it on data readiness, things like that. It's different problems today, but those days, the big problems were like you go into production and then you realize that your model doesn't conform to the shape of the new data. The drift in the data is way too much for the model to be useful. There were a lot of caring and feeding that you have to do. It was so, unforgiving for machine learning
Sure.
systems to actually handle the variance of the data. That's changed now, and now we have different prompts.
You know, yeah, I feel like we have different problems, but maybe it's there is kind of more of the same of that. People still have that concern of like data integrity and accuracy. And my question is, you're getting into an industry that a lot of people may be a little bit afraid of in healthcare, like right now, and because there's so much. I mean, I think healthcare. I used to work in paid ads prior to doing what I do now, and one of my clients was a healthcare company. Compliance, compliance, compliance was all I thought about. So what was it? What is it like, and how was it like getting started in healthcare with AI? Because I can imagine there's probably some interesting roadblocks and like hurdles to come over there too.
No, yes, there is. I mean, there is, well, two things, right? When you're building a company, no matter how hard you try, it's going to be hard, right? You're always going to have to put in the work. You
Amen
always
to
have to
that.
build
Yeah.
something. So the
Yeah.
big thing for us was about, right, look, while we're doing something, let's do something meaningful that has got lasting impact, makes a difference to the world, all that stuff. So that was like healthcare right after COVID. It was almost, I'm a engineer, technologist, and it's almost a sin not to apply all that expertise and experience into something that we just saw during COVID, how the health crisis can completely bring populations down, governments down, the entire human global ecosystem down. So it was almost a sin not to apply all of that experience and expertise into
True.
something that makes a difference. So that was one thing. Now, to your point on, yes, healthcare is different. It's very different. And I think it's very different in so many different ways. One,
Okay.
it is very, the value in healthcare is, healthcare works because of the people that's in healthcare, right? And there's a huge nuance that people don't understand. Wherein, I can just automate this particular workflow. Well, you can automate any workflow any which way you want,
Sure.
but the big part of healthcare is the care side of it, and the care comes from a human
Well, yeah.
touch, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that nuances in terms of you have to understand, you have to get deeper into the workflows and so forth. In terms of compliance and all the other things, right? So every industry is built, or like healthcare being one of the most regulated industries, there's a reason we're in there. Now, you can argue whether you need a lot of that regulation, should it be opened up. So that aside, right, it's a it's a it's a constrained system because of regulation, because of rulings, because of adherences, and because of the cost of compliance, all of that stuff. But to me, that is all like constraints, drive innovation. So you have to just engineer the solutions for that problem. So things
Around
like,
it. Yeah.
right. So big things like, we focused on, right, day one. And one of the founding thesis of Autonomize AI is like, you cannot retrofit a vanilla horizontal platform for AI, or a horizontal model for AI into healthcare, because it doesn't understand the nuances. It doesn't have the right scaffolding for compliance, for enablement, for building trust with the users, and like you said, accuracy versus, variance of, like, data. How do you actually be less forgiving on the things of data? How do you make sure the quality of the output is always good? All of that constraints were like engineered in and baked in the way we thought about healthcare, right? So we don't do a
Okay.
lot of work outside healthcare. We just focus on healthcare, and we built it for the ground up in healthcare, understanding the nuances of the workflows, the data types, the users, how healthcare operates. If you really think about there's so many problems in every industry, but in healthcare, the biggest thing is like healthcare as an industry produces more than 2/3 of all the data in the world. Is most 2/3 of the data.
Really? Okay.
There's
2/3 of all. Wow.
and it's I think they also count all the variables and all the other data, which has completely exploded over the last 10 years or so.
Sure. Yeah.
Yet as an industry, we're probably the furthest behind using the data to better the human condition, right? Because you can blame it on regulation and stuff like that, but it's also
Yeah.
because there's incentive models. You have to understand how healthcare works, who pays for it. There's so many different nuances into it. And our key focus today is about like the biggest way you can impact healthcare, and like as an industry, is if you change the economics of driving the business of care. And that's what we focused on at Autonomize, right? And I can
Okay.
unpack that a little bit more. But the idea that, like, you have to make sure that the right care is delivered to the right person at the right time, and they get cared for, paid for the right way, and all of that stuff. Because if you drive and optimize for that, and you lower the admin burden, you lower the cost of care, you increase access to care, you increase the experience, everybody wins, right? And you cannot fight the system of, hey, oh, this shouldn't be this way. You cannot have a capitalist economy running healthcare. It has to be nationalized versus not. All of those are
Sure. Yeah.
different models, different
Yeah.
constraints. But I think, the opportunity we have in front of us, especially in the age of agentic AI right now, is to how do you go and re-architect the operating system needed to deliver care?
Yeah. So it feels like you touched on a couple different points there where, we can talk about how you are impacting healthcare itself. But first, I think maybe a more specific thing that we could get into is the nature of how your AI is maybe built to be more specific, because a lot of the concerns that people have about quality, it seems like most of the answers that I'm getting from founders here is it's like, well, we're building this from the ground up, catered towards X use case or X industry, right? So that seems to be a consistent thread, and I just want to pull on that a little bit more. And it's like, it's just interesting to me that the concern is obviously there, and rather than, like you're saying, people try to be general, it seems like a lot of people are realizing, okay, well, we'll just be more specific, and that's the constraint we're working with. We'll pick our vertical. And how are you seeing in the tech though? Because I'm just curious, generally speaking, it improved to be more general, right? Because it seems like at this point I've only heard over and over again. It's like, well, we're trying to be specific because we want it to be good. Are you seeing though that there's like a trend that it's getting better generally as well
Yeah.
at the same time though, after you already like, I don't want to say pigeonholed yourself, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting question, and this has been, I think it's going to be the debate for a while in the industry on
Yeah,
like
general or,
yeah, and the whole idea of AGI, right? And
mhm.
it, definitions can be very unique to how people look at it. Instead, I don't think it's going to be one AGI in general. It's going to be multiple AGIs in the industry, right?
Mhm.
You're going to have industry specific AGI, but I
Mhm.
think again the definition of what is general versus specialized kind of thing. I think that there's two ways to think through it, and here's how we think through it,
Yeah.
right? One is you got to solve specific problems that deliver high quality output. So, be it accuracy, be it latency, be it timelines and stuff like that. So, in the 1960s AI conference, the big Dartmouth conference that coined the term artificial intelligence, all the scientists and all the great people at that time, got together and they agreed on a definition of AI. And they said artificial intelligence is a bag of tools for a bag of problems. That was the only definition they
Hmm.
agreed on, right?
It's
It
pretty good.
can,
That's especially kind of interesting. Yeah.
it is more true today than ever before because the
Yeah.
default mode today is you go and pick an LLM and start looking for nails, and the LLM is a hammer. You just go try to bridge that thing down, right? It gives what really generative AI and this age of the GPT era really showed us is like one big thing was people didn't expect AI to be as good as it is for doing atomic tasks like looking at a picture and identifying what's in there, looking at text and understanding tone, intonation, or meaning out of that, or looking at, time series data and predicting the next thing. All of those individual atomic things, like people didn't realize how good it was, and people can't really put it all together. And then a generalist model came in that can put all of these things together, and suddenly the expectation gap where people thought AI was and where AI really was just collapsed, right? And that created, and there was a user experience paradigm that also changed, wherein like you now can interact with intelligence, have a dialogue and conversation, which is great. I mean, it's great for very generalist kind of use cases. But you're not going to be able to move the needle with a chatbot in most industries, right? You can in some cases, because
Mm.
that's not where, like healthcare, for example. I'll give you two examples, right? One, and I'll tell you what we learned as well in this process, and I'll try to link it back to the question you were asking on general versus specific. A general solution for, let's say, we're dealing with payment integrity for health plans, or like looking at, hey, whether a claim was paid out at the right level, where it was coded right, and so forth. We did a solution back like 2 years ago, 3 years ago almost, to create like this payment policies are complex. There are like hundreds of PDF documents sitting in a SharePoint site. So we curated all of that in a rack pattern, gave a chatbot to the users in the health plan, and said, go ask questions. Nobody asked questions because it was changing their existing workflow to go do something else that may or may not give them value, but they didn't buy into it,
Yeah.
right? Same solution, we anticipated it and go and say, look, what I want you to do is when you click on that, review claim, what are you going to do next? I'm going to anticipate what question you're going to ask and give you the insight at that point of interaction. That user experience change, same rack capability applied in a workflow context, changed the game. 100% utilization within the first 3 months, right? Huge value savings and all that stuff. Your generalist versus specialist kind of a model. So there's a lot of these nuances in there. So there is no one answer versus not. I think today to deliver solution values to particular workflows and stuff, whether you use a generalist LLM model underneath it, but you have to still
Mm.
adapt it to a particular specific workflow. And I fundamentally believe that, context is where the magic is. It's not the data, it's not the model, it's the context. And the context is often sitting inside a workflow, right? If you look at, healthcare, for example, there's medical charts. Everybody talks about medical charts, but the visiting physician who's reviewing EMR for medical charts looks for very different things on that chart, understanding a patient's trajectory and treatment protocol and so forth, versus a clinical researcher who's looking at the same chart and trying mental math. They're trying to actually map it to 16 inclusion-exclusion criteria for a clinical trial. The same charts, when reviewed by, exact same chart, reviewed by a prior authorization nurse in a health insurance company, they're
Yeah.
reviewing for medical necessity against payment policies and so forth. So what we learned very early on is like you have to separate that content layer, which is like transforming data from unstructured to structured and so forth, to the context in which you're operating it. And that works really well when you have very specific, a lot of small language models, lots of augmentation of large language models with small language models. But it's all the magic is in the context, which is inside the workflow. So I don't think there's one answer where generalist versus specialist, but I would say a lot of the use cases when the general moniker we use is if your use case or the solution, the problem you're solving has to do with how can I mimic a human communication paradigm? I mean, responding to queries, customer service, all of that stuff. These large generalist models, because people are very unpredictable in the way what they tell you, what they themselves don't know what they're going to tell you next. So you need a larger model that is generally capable to go have that with it, writing content, all of that stuff. If it's a specific task, I am looking for signals inside medical charts to identify if the patient needs or has a care gap of how they manage their diabetes. You don't need a trillion tokens to be, ran through and resent across to actually answer that question. That's like stupid, right? So I think there's no one answer to it, but what we have actually seen it work is like solve specific problems and then generalize it across. Now, one last thing I'd say on that same topic, and this is how we see the future. When you start
Sure.
capturing context across multiple workflows in an enterprise, this is what we do really well at Autonomize, right? We don't just do prior auth versus care management versus this. We go down and help them assemble the building block agents to go solve specific problems. But then in the process, you're capturing the nuance, the data that's not in digital form. Sally knows how to actually do, prior authorization for DME equipments because she has done it for 30 years. It's not in a job aid. It's not in a SOP document anywhere. We capture that because you build an interactive paradigm to capture that. Let Sally share that with you. Now, all of a sudden, you're capturing that context in that workflow. And you do that for the next workflow and the next workflow and the next workflow. Now, we have probably the best data set of understanding the context switches that happen within a health enterprise. And that becomes the core data set to build a true healthcare AGI, if you really think about it, right? So yes, the generalist models will work, but you have to start it's a trade-off between am I wasting tokens and electricity and power to actually do it? And eventually those models will get better, but you won't need that. It'll be an overkill. You will need AGI, you'll need general capabilities, but that is going to come out of you build a lot of specialty and then you build a framework for it to actually share that specialty across to become a generalist model, right? Or you get into a coordinator kind of mode where you have a generalist agent that is calling the specialist agents to go do this. So those are the kind of, I would say, architectures that we think through and how we have deployed at Autonomize too. And it also makes it a very practical way to generate and deliver value because AI never had a problem with models and capabilities. It always had an
Mm.
adoption problem, right? People won't adopt it fast enough. You have to get them to adopt it. And all of that is like you give bite-sized value, you get them to interact with you, share data all of a sudden, and then this becomes a generally capable capability over time.
I think that's actually pretty interesting what you mentioned about the architectures there. Like this is something that agentically we are seeing a lot. The director agent followed by the specific sub agents that are doing specific tasks well. Like I use Relevance AI a lot, which has like this workforce capability for the terms that the workflows that I have, and it's very effective for general business purposes. But maybe explain to us a little bit more about how you're utilizing that kind of stuff at Autonomize.
Yeah. So, think about it. We believe like every enterprise, especially health enterprise, but even, uh, let's take a step back. Like think about healthcare. We have 336 million people in the United States. We have 1 million physicians that are there supporting 336 million people in the US. And we can't produce doctors fast enough. It takes 10 years, a lot of money. There are campuses and organizations now that are providing the medical program free of cost for students because we have to produce more. There is 5 to 6 million nurses supporting 336 million people. There is no way we can produce enough human capital to support the needs of an aging, fast-growing population in the United States or around the world for that matter. So you need to rethink this in terms of an enterprise that is in the health services business, need to have an army of agents that are specialized good in augmenting the human workforce that's in there. So that's one framing of this, right? How we do it in our thing, like what we have built is Autonomize is we built a library of 100 odd agents. And these agents are there's a little nuance. I also, a detour on agents here. Agents also, we're in a world of agent washing. Everything is an agent. And when everything is an agent, nothing is an agent.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
So what we have actually, when we define an agent, it doesn't have to be an LLM agent that's conversational in nature. It is an atomic capability that can stand on its own. It solves a particular problem, it optimizes for a goal, and it delivers value. Now, language models or SLMs are better fit for really than a GPT-4 and so forth. So what we did was actually we built a library of agents after we studied the workflows within a health enterprise, a provider, a life sciences company, a health enterprise, a digital health company. We understood that, like, for example, if you're dealing with patients, you deal with intake. You deal with intake of information. You deal with claims processing. You deal with revenue cycle management. You deal with care management, care quality coordination, care coordinate, all of these different things. And we mapped each of those processes to understand where are the bottlenecks. And we built agents to solve those bottlenecks. And what I mean by that is saying, I don't have an Uber agent that does prior authorization end to end for a thing. I mean, we could build that, but most likely it's not going to be successful because the prior authorization is made of 5 or 6 sub processes that are very specific in nature. And that differs from one customer to another, all of that stuff. So what we did was actually we built a library of this 100 odd agents that does everything that a healthcare will need. And they can all be independently called as an API plugged into your existing infrastructure or existing IT systems of record, whatever. And then we built a configurator or orchestrator on top of that, multi-agent workflow engine. We're launching we have a studio product that is in beta right now with our early customers. We're going to GA that later this year. And that allows us to, because what we also learned is like workflows are bespoke. Everybody in healthcare, no two healthcare organizations have the exact same workflow. And anybody who tells you otherwise is BSing. And and the reason, the workflows that matter. I mean, obviously there are some specific workflows.
Yeah, standard
it's
ones.
like, everybody uses Salesforce, but everybody's data model in Salesforce is different. Everybody uses Epic. The way your data is organized within Epic is very different for every single customer, right?
So then how do you personally make sure that you do it? Because you don't work with one company, right? So
yeah. So
yeah.
what we do is like we have this library of agents that are pre-trained, pre-built for a particular thing with a configurator layer that we add on top of that that'll actually allow them to customize it for their particular thing. That's why the studio product is important, because we're seeing more and more healthcare customers, even their technology teams or product owners, even business users, right? If you're a nurse who is reviewing, all you're doing is reviewing musculoskeletal cases every, to look at care gaps and call your patient and do something else. And you have very unique knowledge of what you need to do. If I give you an MSK chart review agent, you can give a little bit more extra prompting on it to make it your own. And that becomes your AI sidekick to go do your job more efficiently, right? We see that is the world that we want to get. AI is not going to be a centralized capability. It's going to be decentralized within organizations, because knowledge and context is often at the edges, not at the core, right? And when I say edges, it's human beings and people, the caregivers, whatever. So what we have enabled is like while we have a library of agents, we allow a layer of configuration on top of that. And there's an age-old adage in platforms when you build it. It's our platforms our agents are open for configuration, closed for modification, right? Because we do, and that closed for modification ensures that we are actually, we can bring in the rigor of actually it's pre-trained on certain data sets. It will not, give you any output for less than, if the confidence score is less than 95%, we won't give you the output, we'll decline it. So things like that we built in. So that's, you can modify those things, right? That's, we do go through a extensive process of validation, user acceptance, clinical validation, evals, all of that stuff. So we go through that process to get that thing, but it can then be configured or customized to your unique workflow needs. That's what makes it exciting, how we do it.
Yeah, I mean, it is. It's almost like, so to speak, and this is where the agentic word kind of gets thrown out a lot, but if you're doing it right, I guess it does make sense. I feel like when people are doing it properly, like yourself, you're essentially building out sub functions of jobs, so to speak, or like capabilities of a person, right? Like and this is where the next question naturally leads. I'm seeing a lot of trends from answers on the podcast about this, and I'm curious where you think it's going to go. Like, you are obviously making these functions that'll help save time so that, and I think in the healthcare industry, this is going to be a different answer. That's why I'm curious. It's saving time for people. It's helping them give better care. Cause let's be honest, a lot of like the time that unfortunately doctors, nurses, etc. spend is just on like documentation that's like nonsensical. How much time it takes for them, and it stresses them out, and then they don't do as good of a job as honestly AI would. So do you feel like this is just going to help in your case maybe differently than some of the other industries? Because like in marketing or like sales, all these areas, people are just concerned about like job loss, but I feel like it could actually be an interesting thing where it's just like we just get better care, right, in healthcare. Maybe I'm off base, but
no, I think it's a good question, right? I think there's two things if you extrapolate how this world progresses, right? There's one, the classic argument that, well, a lot of the mundane jobs will be lost. I don't believe that. I think it will evolve and it'll change, right? You know, it's history has shown us. I don't want to go into it, like horse riders versus cars and drivers and all of that stuff too. It'll create a class of new, jobs that didn't exist. Like you have AI engineers, prompt engineers. One of the things we actually do is like our ML engineers don't write prompts. We give that prompts, and it is a very nuanced thing where we say, look, the prompt should be written by the folks who are closer to the problem, not the one building the model, right? Writing prompts in a programmatic fashion and prompt engineering practices and stuff, I think things will evolve quite a bit. The best one to write that prompt on a model to how it actually should behave is the one who's closest to the problem or the knowledge or the context, right? So that's one thing. So I think in any industry, so you're going to have some labor displacement, which is a temporary thing, because people, as they say, right, like it's not the AI is going to take the doctor's job away, but the doctors who don't use AI will actually now be displaced by the doctors who use AI because there'll be more things. In healthcare is a little bit more nuanced because we still need every doctor we can get a hold of. So that's a different problem. So I think one is most industries will see AI as an augmentation layers, like I like to call it the Jarvis suit, right? Everybody has the opportunity to become Iron Man today because you have an AI-powered Jarvis suit that you can actually use to go do your jobs better. Some of the more mundane industry, I would say not mundane, but like some of the more industries that are more standardized in nature, like marketing, for example, like digital marketing. It's a class of things. There's only certain things you do and stuff. You will get the vanilla treatment with just AI and not having any human beings. But then it becomes more competitive. How do you stand out? You stand out by having that human touch. You stand out by doing things that everybody else is doing, which is basically what's on the internet that's trained on these large language models. And then if you are more creative, you now have an edge over everybody else, right? And I think
there's a significant problem with like if you look at even, I'll let you, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. There's a significant problem in marketing right now where it's like a feedback loop where content's being written by AI, which is being written by content, which is being written by AI. And then now with the advent of the web search functionality naturally into all of the models, it like feedback loops itself even more. So like something came out the other week which is like atrociously bad. 40% of the web search content results coming from like a Google Bard, or not, sorry, I can't call it Bard. Gemini's like AI previews coming from Reddit. And I'm like, that's bad. I was like, okay. I was like, all right, cool. So but then the other percentages are from blogs, which are being written by what? Which are being written by AIs that are LLMs. Referencing Reddit.
It's interesting. It's
and I'm like so everything's loop. I'm like, okay, so now everything's a Reddit tier argument. Great. That sounds so awesome.
Funny. I mean, the silver lining in all this, Dimitri, is the fact that, look, I think it is an opportunity. All of this noise will make it all the more human again to perform really great work, right? I mean, think about what the output of this is like. You will probably, I mean, we see this in fraud that is happening with video fraud, like people making calls to other people, and it's not actually people, it's their AIs that's being trained on their avatar of public places,
Hmm.
public figures. You're seeing voice calls that voice emulates everything based on, you and I, you post this podcast. I'm sure your grandma will probably get a call saying it's Dimitri, which sounds like you because you have enough content on YouTube to actually go train that
Listen,
bot on, right?
my senile old Greek grandmother is not going to be happy to hear this. So, no, but
So
seriously, I haven't had to tell my parents before, like, hey, we have to have like code words or something,
exactly, and
because
I think
like, yeah.
so. What this will all lead to, if you really extrapolate this, Dimitri, is that it will become more meaningful to have those human connections. For example, more business will be done in face-to-face settings than on Zoom. I mean, it's going to happen very soon because you won't trust what you're going to see on the other side of the screen, right? Because you can have code words all you want, but you're having what used to be an amazing meeting, and you go sit in there. And it's like, I don't know whether this is an AI that's just saying what I want to hear. And some of these, all these recursive self-attention models are really good at psychophany. So he'll actually tell you exactly what you want to hear, right? And this creates this bubble. All of that now it's just like, okay, you want real business to happen? Go meet in person, go make this happen. You want meaningful relationships to be built? It just happens to happen on person. So all of this, I think this whole noise levels going up because of all the content being generated on the internet. Um, I don't think it's going to make the internet any less effective. It's just going to be a different way we evolve into a hybrid world where human connection becomes even more meaningful than it was because because that becomes the scarce thing. So whenever humans have some scarcity, it
Well,
has more
I
value.
mean, that's a good point. I think for me, like, been trying to do like sales work and stuff, and I was just thinking about the other day. I'm like, I should go in person. People would just be so shocked. Or like I have friends who are trying to get jobs right now, and I'm like, you should just go. Like when it's like I want your writing samples, just show up. They'll be so gobsmacked. Like, like
It
you
becomes the
came?
exception, not the rule.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, and it's a very weird environment we're in now. So, but like healthcare has obviously even had that trend a little bit too. Like I'm asthmatic, or at least I have like a athletic induced asthma and or exercise induced asthma, and like I got another albuterol prescription like over telehealth, and that was just weird to me. The experience there was odd, and I'm like, I kind of miss. I was like, can I go to the doctor? And I'm like, but I don't want to. The experience was odd, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it's an interesting
You know,
interesting world we're living in.
let's also, the other thing, the other side of this is like, we talk about this from healthcare. I always believe like healthcare is a lot about care than health, right? So that whole human condition, I mean, there's enough research and done like historically how you had these healers in communities before civilization took off and became very scientific, right? You had like
Sure, I
all
would
these
agree.
Reiki healers, if you remember, right? So all of that stuff there's not enough research done. There's like quantum vibrations and all of that stuff that actually leads to how people get healed. The evidence-based medicine and all of that stuff came in much later in this civilization's
It did.
history. So,
Yep.
right. So there's an element of that. The other thing is like I think the positive side of this whole thing is right now with AI, you can have a really meaningful conversation with your doctor, right? Because you get a lab report, you throw it up on Perplexity or ChatGPT, and at least you know what questions to ask. Now, the problem is you cannot cross that line and saying you have to know when it is actually bullshitting versus not, which is the hard thing. That's why you get trained on. But at least, hey, what question should I ask? So you're going to get into a world where the educated healthcare consumer is good. This, I think, the other part we don't talk about enough is like consumers are now in a much more powerful position in healthcare than they traditionally have been. And we are seeing that when we work with healthcare businesses, how much they are seeing the change in behavior on the patients, right? Earlier it was like, you get an appointment when you get it. Right now, they're like, okay, if they can have means for it, they'll get concierge care, they'll get telehealth, they'll go to your competitor, they'll go to. So you have to start thinking about, and you can't just say you still hear stories where providers or doctors who are like they're just so busy they spend 60-70% of their time doing administrative bottleneck. They're frustrated. They do pajama time on the computer after the kids
Yeah,
go to
they
bed.
don't want to do all that. Like I don't think that's been any of their.
Yeah. And then so when
I don't think people get into healthcare for that reason.
no, in fact, nobody, like if you really think about people who get into healthcare, especially in the US healthcare system, software engineers probably get paid more. They don't have to work the odd hours that these guys do. They listen to sick people all day. They, your people are constantly complaining on their face every day, and you still have to go and you get calls in the middle of the night. All of that stuff, they do it for mostly altruistic reasons. They're like, I want to make a difference to my community, to the patients, solve problems, that kind of stuff. And as a system, we've kind of failed them a little bit, like especially the healthcare frontline workers to do it. I think AI is the opportunity to rewrite that narrative for everybody and for healthcare knowledge workers.
And do you feel like that's, I mean, if that was your ultimate goal for what you're building, that would be helping to make that like more of a easy reality?
Yeah, no. So look, we're building the infrastructure needed to make healthcare run better, right? And that includes how businesses can optimize their business to deliver best care, how patients can actually use the available information and access to care and make it easy for them to go understand it. Like simple things like you get EOB bills. It's like a maze. How much do I really owe my provider? Should I pay this bill? Should I not? It's a maze, right? Simple
If it
problems
wasn't
for
from
AI.
my parents and the internet, I have no idea how anybody would solve. I let alone anyone would solve that. Like it is actually the most frustrating experience getting those
Right.
bills.
And then
So what do I owe?
What do I owe? So and then it's on the provider side, like you said, you don't want them doing pajama time with their kids after they go to bed. Every doctor in the United States spend at least 2 or 3 hours of time after the kids go to bed finishing up the notes and administrative work for the day.
No
It's
shoot.
ridiculous. It is
That's really sad, actually.
bonkers. And nurses and PAs and nurse practitioners and stuff too, right? I mean, it's just like all of these folks, all of the folks in care who are the point of care, they're so administratively burdened that the last time they read a research on how to manage a chronic condition like diabetes was when they were in med school. So it just doesn't help.
That doesn't
anybody.
sound ideal.
It is not ideal at all. So I think
That
that's
doesn't
the
sound
opportunity.
ideal.
So our point is, how do we go give, the first order business for us is like, give Jarvis suits to everybody in healthcare, make them more productive, give them the right things, give them the right infrastructure to go run business care. Second, help the businesses have the right operating system to deliver care effectively, efficiently, and don't have to spend a lot of money doing dumb things, to be honest, right? Final frontier for us
they
is
are
gonna
dumb.
be, they are. And the final frontier for us is going to be then, how do you go empower the healthcare consumer with all of the work we're doing to make sure they can make better informed decisions? And, I want us to really get to a future where we don't talk about healthcare as being taking care of the sick people. Healthcare should be a conversation about longevity, quality of life. How do you live your full life? How is more, fulfillment across beyond just like, thank God I stayed out of the hospital this year, right? That is the true north for what we can do if you just apply technology the right way, empower the right people, and go deliver a difference with AI.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I think that's a good plan. I like that for you. I think that there was a company that I worked with as a client a while back where it first started hitting me that that the AI trend could really help healthcare a lot. It's called SoapNote AI, and they just very much harped on. I mean, it's a note-taking methodology. I didn't know this. I'm not in healthcare. And I know I just feel like this is a realm where a lot of people who are skeptical about AI should take a look, because I'm sure there's more industries just like it that we're not thinking of it in that way. And everyone's obviously always concerned about what's going to happen with the job market and maybe the more traditional, less more standard job situations. But with this, everyone's impacted by healthcare. Everyone's impacted by the costs. Everyone's impacted by poor healthcare. Everyone has a story.
Everyone has a story.
Or their family or whoever, their friend that has had a poor healthcare experience. And I wouldn't doubt that it's due to the administrative bloat, and that could be either from a cost standpoint where there's too many administrators, so the cost of healthcare rises, or someone was too tired to properly research something because they're doing all this stupid paperwork. So
No, it's exactly right. It's either, like, as you said, like all the cycle time, all the cost of care, and the quality of care that we receive can be rooted
yeah,
back into everybody's overburdened with administrative processing.
yeah.
People get tired and make errors and omissions that they shouldn't do. And then, it's just like alignment of incentives is another big problem in the healthcare industry. But it, increasing transparency can go a long way, and that's where like things like AI can come into play. To your question on, like, I think more organizations, it's very rewarding to see are taking the step right now. Like when we started the company 3.5 years ago, it was uphill battle trying to get organizations to talk to us about like, hey, I'm not sure, we're not ready for AI. Right now, it's a boardroom conversation. CEOs are actually being told by the Google and Microsoft executives that they talk to, so you can cut your 50% of your IT budget by using AI instead of engineers. That's what they usually tell them.
Then they get
But
excited. Yeah.
then they get excited. At least it starts the conversation, right? I think the big thing I would say, what is happening right now, and it's going to be more and more critical for us to continue to do this as an industry, especially in healthcare, is separate the signal from the noise. There is a lot of noise. There's a lot of folks who come in and say, because everything looks good on a demo, because it's easy to build a demo with, that 50% cost reduction on dev. That applies to building demos, right? You can build a demo in a few minutes or like 30 minutes using Google Gemini or build a GPT to just show something and stuff like that. So, but the proof is in the pudding. So, for example, we work with three of the five largest healthcare enterprises in the United States. One of
Sure.
them, in the last 18 months or so that we've been working with, we're able to do $100 million of G&A compression, their general administrative costs, in terms of operational
Whoa.
cost savings. Not just because of us, but all the operational efficiencies that we brought in, and that allows them to reimagine some of the workflows. Because the first order of business, Dimitri, is like, oh, I'll go take down inefficiency. I'll just compress this workflow. I'll solve this problem here, solve this problem there. All of a sudden, you'll see that, oh shit, why am I actually solving this in, band-aids, where I can just completely, now I've just exposed it to the bones and I can reimagine this entire workflow. Why should I actually go through 15 touch points before it gets to that point? So then you start having those conversations. And now we're helping them reimagine some of these workflows, which will be huge cost takeout opportunity, redeployment opportunity, right? Like the big thing in healthcare, like we don't have enough people to deliver care. So those people, those nurses who are doing administrative processing in a health plan should be at the point of care, delivering care to patients, should be at the care management, talking to patients and helping them navigate their care plan or update it and, all of that stuff. I think that's what we're unlocking for them. So the positive double whammy here is that on the one hand, you reduce your general administrative expense on your balance sheet, looks better and everything. On the other hand, you can redeploy that to high value areas like care management, population management, that gives you better outcomes, health outcomes of patients. Patients like hearing from doctors and nurses, right? I mean, we don't have time to go, but I have so many stories when we talk to provider groups and or health plans or patients even, where simple things, just the fact that like a GI group, like a gastro group, if you will,
Yes.
there's
Yeah.
some of
Mhm.
these diseases where, like, if you have like IBD or IBS kind of diseases like irritable bowel syndrome, the follow-up protocol is very, very, very critical because it can lead to really bad outcomes. And it's as simple as calling the patient and saying, hey, how are you feeling? Do you feel bloated or not? But the nurses or the folks don't have the time to do that. So what happens? The patient goes into a protocol. The next time their appointment is 3 months later, they've already gone to a situation. And 3 months later, when they come in or they have something happen, they have to redo the appointment. Now they've lost the window. Now they're waiting for another 4 weeks. All of a sudden, situation degrades. It becomes a bigger episode than it should have been. All it took was the time to make one call, have that conversation, check in on that patient. But they don't have the bandwidth to do that today. So I think, all of these things pulled together, healthcare is in a better place today to do that. I think more and more organizations, they should, we're talking to several organizations and others who are listening to this should reach out to us. We'll show them how to actually think about it. So my point on signal to the noise, we're one of the very few organizations in healthcare AI today that has generated value for our customers. You see the metrics on our website. we have been able to, and then because we are focused on, hey, the business of care kind of an ecosystem. We're not trying to solve for, hey, how do I find the next drug, or how do I actually go, do the best, point of care solution to do a diagnostic better and stuff. We're focused on making the system less painful for patients and providers. And
Okay.
that focus has given us a lot of early lessons in what to do, what not to do, and we've been able to generate a lot of value for our customers and organizations. So I think I'm more bullish and more positive about healthcare than I was 3.5 years ago. So it's really great to see. I think there's a lot to be thankful for, all the generalist movement, the AGI movement, because all of that raises the conversation, the awareness of the situation, which makes everybody pay attention, which then now you have to get into the mode of actually not just learning and listening and hearing about this and listening to your podcast, but then I want to try it. I want to see what's right for me as an organization, as an individual, do more of that, get the value. So now we're passing from that phase of, it's still hyped up, and earlier it was Gen AI, now it's agents hype and stuff like that. But that switch from just being the hype and talking about it to say, like, how do I do some things, generate value? We're hoping that in the entire industry gets to that point very quickly, and at least our customers are getting there, so which is great to see.
Absolutely, and I think that's something that I want to just tell everyone as a closeout to this episode. Please go check out what they're doing at Autonomize. Please check out and if there's anything else you want to plug, please feel free to. Ganesh has a LinkedIn. Obviously, everyone's got a LinkedIn, but he's got a decent following on there. You want to go check him out there. Posting some cool stuff, it seems like, too. So yeah.
And the last thing I would say, I would add on to that, Demetrius, and thank you again for having me on the show. AI is such a critical conversation for, it's pop culture now. It's part of how we actually, our kids are going to grow up, all of that stuff.
Sure.
Yeah. Don't leave the conversation to only people who think they can be in the room. So everybody needs to participate and take part in it, right? And for that reason, I 4 years ago, 3-4 years ago, now you have a lot more podcasts, but I started this podcast called Stories in AI, and we're going to, start the next season, in a couple of weeks. Actually, we're going to launch this next season. So I have 200 plus episodes on it, and, your podcast is amazing. And we're more focused on folks who are actually in the throes of, using AI, building AI in large organizations, small organizations and stuff, ethics researchers and stuff like that, to go and share what they're seeing beyond just what you read on public news, right? So we try to actually engage the conversation with the goal. Idea was actually inspire everybody to take part in it. So great job to you. What you're doing is elevating the awareness and the education, the engagement for people. I think everybody should take part in it and participate in this movement, and make it your own. I think, back in, I was in one of my previous companies I was in, we had this phrase that we used to say, and it's more apt today. Take part in it. You and AI can change the world, and you and I can change the world, kind of a thing, wherein you can actually make it your own, or you now have the tools to do it than you didn't have it 4 or 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Right? So I think, it's a very important aspect of, how we evolve as a civilization. And I think it's a huge call to action for everybody. But thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Of course. No, thank you so much for being on here. Everyone, please make sure to go check out Autonomize .ai. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Thanks, Demetrius.